For millennia, the Grand Pyramids of Egypt have towered over the desert sands. Everything about the great ancient civilization that once seized the lands remained a mystery. That is, until July 19, 1799. A French soldier discovers a large stone about 35 miles east of Alexandria during Napoleon Bonaparte's Egyptian expedition, unearthing a written language that had been dead for thousands of years. The translations would prove to be the key to unlocking the secrets of an entire civilization. Egypt is the gift of the Nile. That's what Herodotus, the father of history, said. Since the Nile is the lifeline, as it provided Egypt with water for the cultivation of crops, which led to the burgeoning of civilization all along the length of the Nile Valley. The river strip that divided the Egyptian territory into two parts provided a favorable environment for the rise of civilization when the Nile Valley began in the Miocene times, cutting it into its current shape. The various geographical resources effectively contributed to the state's foundation. As a result of the annual floods that spread the fertile soil to the east and west over the centuries, mud deposits built up. When the water recedes and flows along its banks, the agricultural year begins, making Egypt one of the first agricultural communities that ever existed in human history. At the end of the Paleolithic era, there was a widespread production of arrows, harpoons, querns, sewed skins, boneworks, and pottery. Carbon-14 tests, on the other hand, were used by researchers to demonstrate that corn was harvested in a Neolithic silo on the edge of Fayum between 4600 and 4250 BC. Later, people built shacks and huts out of reeds and solid mud and sowed corn on the muddy soil of the Nile marshes. Ancient Egypt was divided into two territories, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Lower Egypt lay to the north, where the Nile extended out with its several branches to form the Nile Delta. Upper Egypt, which stretched to Aswan, was to the south. The two kingdoms were united around 3000 BC by King Narmer, but each retained its regalia, the Hedjet or white crown for Upper Egypt and the Deshret or red crown for Lower Egypt. As a result, the pharaohs were known as the rulers of the two lands, and they wore the Shent, a double crown with each half denoting sovereignty of a different land. The pre-dynastic period in ancient Egypt is the period preceding documented history, encompassing around 6000 to 3150 BCE from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic age and on to the founding of the First Dynasty. While there are no written records from this period, archaeological digs in Egypt have unearthed items that convey their tale of the Nile River Valley's cultural history. The pre-dynastic period is called by the regions or ancient city sites where these artifacts were discovered, rather than the cultures that lived there. The Halfan culture thrived circa 30,000 BCE in the area between Egypt and Nubia, giving birth to the Cadon and Sibyllian cultures around 10,000 BCE, and the Hierophant culture. All of these cultures are hunter-gatherer societies that gradually grew more sedentary and settled into more permanent settlements based on agriculture. The Fayum Oasis is a natural basin located southeast of the Giza Plateau that gave home to the Fayum A civilization during 9000 to 6000 BCE. These people lived in the vicinity of a vast lake and made their living through agriculture, hunting, and fishing. The people of Fayum constructed reed homes with subterranean basements for food storage. Cattle, sheep, and goats were domesticated, and basketry and pottery production flourished. During this period, tribal chieftains assumed positions of power, which may have been passed down to the next generation in a family or tribal unit. Communities went from tiny tribes traveling together to large groupings of diverse tribes living in the same region all the time. The Fayum-A culture gave rise to the Merimde during 5000 to 4000 BCE, which was named from artifacts discovered at the location of that name on the western side of the Nile Delta. The majority of Egyptians were farmers, and agriculture was the basis of the dynastic Egypt economy, and farmers relied on the annual summer floods to grow their crops. We know that the first Egyptian farmers were hunter-gatherers. They planted crops such as wheat, lentils, barley, flax, and peas, in addition to herding animals. According to what was found on a location in the western side of the Nile Delta, the oldest levels of Merimdi Beni Salama that evolved between 8000 and 4000 BC, in addition to the Fayum Basin, both dating back to the Neolithic era. The Nile Valley's convex terrain encouraged the development of several basins, which in ancient times were flooded with floodwaters every year that brought silt and mud that fertilized the soil. These basins, of which 130 have been found, served as the irrigation system's reservoirs in ancient Egypt. Granaries were made of clay jars or baskets that were buried